Call to order the February 19th, 2020 meeting of the Harwich Conservation Commission. And anyone that hasn't signed in yet, please make sure that you do so. And required to state that as required by open meeting law, the Conservation Commission is informing the public that this meeting will be videotaped and recorded. Anyone else intending to record is required to inform the chairman prior to the meeting. The first item on the agenda is a request for determination of applicability. And John, the first three items, the presenter is not here yet, so we'll defer those for the time being. The fourth item is a notice of intent for 168 John Joseph Road for a seasonal dock. And would you state your name and
Sure. Good evening. My name is Rick Sharon, and I'm here with my wife Maggie Sharon.
Okay, thank you.
And, we're the owners of 168 John Joseph Road.
Describe what you're here for.
Okay, great. So thank you for taking the time. We were here at the September 4th, 2019 meeting to request approval for an overall plan that related to renovations of our home, the surrounding land, and to get the dock permitted at the same time. In preparing for that meeting, we realized that the dock had never been permitted. We purchased the home about 3 years ago. The dock's been used probably for 10 or 15 years, but we realized it hadn't been permitted. At that meeting, you approved our notice of intent, except you carved out the seasonal dock because it was not on the stamped engineered plan. And then you asked us to come back within 6 months of the order of conditions to get approval to permit the dock. So we're here tonight. We prepared a whole new NOI package, and we thought that'd be the easiest way to go. And we do have a stamped engineered site plan that has the dock on it now. It's titled the Seasonal Dock Plan. And in the narrative for the NOI, we noted that we're just seeking your approval to continue to use the dock that's been used for many years. The dock is seasonal, as it's mentioned in the plan. It's just a floating plastic dock, and so it's only in the pond from Memorial Day till about Labor Day or Columbus Day, depending on when we take it out. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about it.
Good. Amy, any comments?
Little things. So, other things you permitted on the land side of the project. We have been on site and talked about proper placement of the dock in the off-season. And then, so we're really just here for the dock. Natural Heritage does not need to see this again, which is good. A couple comments I do have. I mean, I know that you kind of inherited this dock, which is a blessing, and yet you're here too. But so it doesn't quite conform to our dock regulations. So I think to stay consistent with what we require everybody else to conform to, that we would have to have you do that as well. So that would mean the dock would have to change a little bit. What I am recommending is that this approximate placement of the 1.5 wide plank and 1.5 wide and 10 foot long plank, that you'd be allowed to make that as wide as the rest of, well, the dock that it connects to if you wanted to. But that the dock itself, or what kind of the L end of the dock, the widest part, our regulations state that it really should only be is to be only 100 square feet in size. And you have 160 square feet. So I would recommend that we stay consistent, and that your float end, if you will, be no larger than 100 square feet in size, and that I'm not going to dictate the exact dimensions to you. It can be T or L shaped, but that you do bring it into conformance with those regulations that we do have. But with that, I would recommend approval of it. I should say that the reason we have that regulation is to prevent excess shading to the bottom of the pond where there's vegetation and life and things like that. So that's one of the reasons we have that requirement.
Thank you. And so I might request, if I could just explain, maybe if we can meet somewhere in the middle at 120 square feet. The nature of the dock, it's, as I mentioned, plastic floating dock. Think of it like Legos. They basically attach together, and there are 4 40 square foot pieces. So we either get down to 120 square feet or we have to jump all the way down to 80 square feet, which gives us a lot less space for the various sunfish and other things that we have on the pond. So I would just request that we might consider 120 square feet.
John?
Yeah, I agree with Amy's assessment. I think we need to strive for consistency here in terms of what we permit and not permit. So I'm fine with approving this, allowing for for up to 4 foot wide pier, I guess is the term we use. That is what connects the shorefront to the float. Directly to the shore and up to 100 square feet of float. That's
Stan?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement with John says.
Mark, any comments?
Well, personally, I'd be satisfied with 120 square feet versus 100, because 120 is a whole lot better than 180. And I would prefer to see you not have to go through the additional expense unnecessarily. That's all.
Jim?
These steel pilings that's on, steel pipe?
It is steel pipe, so the plastic floats have like just a plastic collar attached to them, and we just put a steel
You
pipe through that.
seasonally drive them in?
I'm sorry?
Seasonally drive the
That's right,
pipes
yeah.
in a little?
It doesn't move
Push them
around
in.
very much, so
Yeah.
it's like pretty minimal.
And you're able to take it apart and move it somewhere else for the off season?
Yeah, we
Is that-
actually bring it up on the bank for the off-season, stack the pieces.
It was on that brick patio that you see
Oh,
there.
right.
And the neighbor was also using it. We had to move it closer to the path.
Yeah, had we approved that as a storage location at the last
Well,
meeting?
approved me to go to their site with them and approve it.
Right, right. Yeah, I kind of agree that we gotta stay consistent with the size. Comment?
What are the size of the sections themselves?
They're 8 feet by 5 feet,
8 by 5?
so it's 40 square feet, and there's 4 of them that go together to make that 10 by 16.
Yeah. What's the width of the dock going? So you have the walkway basically that goes out to the floating sections?
Yes, that's 4 feet wide.
The walkway?
4 feet wide, yeah.
And then when you get out to the floating sections, it becomes 5 feet, is that right?
Let me
It's
make
a
sure.
1.5 foot wide plank.
They mean the plank.
Oh, the plank is just a piece of wood, it's 18 inches wide.
Okay, but so the sections themselves are 5 feet in width?
The small piece of the dock itself, where the plank attaches to it,
Yeah,
that's 4 feet wide
yeah.
by 5 feet, and then the other pieces are 5 feet by 8 feet.
Oh, I see,
It's probably
okay.
2 pieces, because it does say 10-foot long plank.
That's right, yeah, there's 2 little
Which I had
4
a-
by 5s, and
Yeah.
there's 4 5 by 8s.
So how many 5 by 8s? 4?
4 of them that makes up the larger rectangle. if you will.
Okay, and then the pieces on the shore end of that, you say are...
Two 4 by 5s.
Okay. So there's no way to reconfigure that with the existing,
I'd have to sit down with some paper and see if there's a way to do it, yeah.
yeah. All right. Are they,
But that would make, that would make the walkway, if you will, 5 feet wide, not 4 feet wide, if we did that, if we reconfigured some of those pieces.
yeah, all right.
How are they attached? Are they at the end of the 4x5 sections or alongside of them? Your 5x8 sections, how are they attached to the 4x?
They kind of just interlock.
But are they alongside of the 4x5s?
They're
or
at the end of them.
Yeah,
At the
like
end
lock.
of them. If you drew a sort of a straight line with.
Well, I'm thinking because 4x5 is the 20-foot
Yeah,
that we're
yeah.
looking at.
Yeah.
I'm trying to look at your drawing here. So you have a walkway that goes on to the first section, which is labeled as 10 feet.
That's two pieces.
So that's the two 4x5s?
That's right,
Okay. And then the other section is 10 by 16,
correct. That's
which is the two 4x5s doubled up. So four of the 4x5s in one place, if I could put a sort of a section right between it. I got you. Okay.
It's just the pieces come in different sizes, so some of them are 8x5s,
Yeah.
and then there's a couple of 4x5s.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah, I tend to agree with the other comments that, we have these regulations in place as far as the dimensions that we allow for the docks, and very seldom do we make any sort of an exception to it, that I'm aware of anyhow, in the time that I've been here. And my feeling, it's the same as some of the other members have expressed, that the 100 square foot is really the requirement that we've stated, and preferable to see that you somehow reconfigure this so that we can meet those dimensions. Are any other comments? Anybody? No? So, we have a motion for the seasonal dock at 168 John Joseph Road.
Do they need to, if they're going to try and reconfigure something, can we make a motion at this point, or do we want to?
We can move to approve the dock within our specifications, and then it would be incumbent on them to
We would
reconfigure
have
it.
to meet with them after, to kind of look at things and see how you could redo it. I have a couple ideas too, that I can share with you.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the notice of intent for 168 John Joseph Road for a seasonal dock, with the float to be a maximum of 100 square feet.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you very much. Appreciate your work with us. The representative is here for the first three, if we can give him a minute to settle in. You go see if I can grab an easel from somewhere. You don't need that. Oh,
All right, next item on the agenda is request for determination of applicability for 1039 Route 28. Please state your name and it's all yours.
The police cars are gonna be coming anytime now, it's race cars at least, and
don't want to be racing on that side.
I apologize for being late, for the record, I'm Tom Riley. What you have in front of you is a site plan that Mary Jane Chase Trust asked us to prepare. On the purpose of the site plan at this point in time is to define what the wetland resources are. The entire parcel is 9.5 acres. It fronts on Route 28 and has a wetland resource on the southeast corner, also known as Red River. town line between Chatham and Harwich. So what we've done is we've defined the edge of the river, the edge of the salt marsh, adjacent to the river, or vegetated wetland adjacent to the river, and then we looked at the topography. Another resource involved is the 100-year flood boundary, which is elevation 11, which we've used to define the coastal bank, which is the most landward resource on this property. So what we have done, starting up at 28, we simply, here we're dealing with the edge of vegetated wetland. Here, it has climbed up in elevation to just over the 11-foot contour.
John, could you put on the map where you are as far as
I'm
28?
starting up in here.
Okay, thank you.
Can you just use flag numbers or something?
I think it's better to put it somewhere because I won't have the map, so I would like to see it.
Okay. We can try to get an easel. We don't have it electronically. We can make, I have an extra copy. Would you like to borrow one? That'll work.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome. Forgot about that for a minute. Okay, sorry, John. go
No,
ahead.
I apologize. So starting up at flag number 1, which is the up adjacent to Route 28, we have a vegetated wetland in this area. This is where the river goes underneath Route 28. From there, we go down to flag number 2, 3, which 2 and 3, which again is the edge of the vegetated wetland. You can see that the elevations there are about 11, a little over 11, so we've used that as the boundary of the resource up to flag number 3. From there, you can follow the flags number 4 all the way down in a southwest direction to flag number 24, which is the landward extent of the vegetated wetland. So going back to flag number 3, we start to pick up the coastal bank at elevation 11. And you can see on this plan I have slopes identified. And if you're familiar with how coastal bank is defined under the DEP policy, we defined the top of the coastal bank in this area, starting at flag number 3, adjacent to flag number 6 as the 100-year flood elevation. Again, continuing in a southwest direction to approximately flag number 8. You can see that we have a bottom of slope shown and a top of slope shown. Again, in this area, between flags 6 and 8, it is the 100-year flood boundary. And actually that continues down to about flag number 9, where we're following the 11-foot contour. At this point in time, the bank exceeds the 4-to-1 slope, which is the triggering mechanism of where the coastal bank will jump up to the break-in slope where it breaks less than 1 to 4. So again, starting around flag number 9, we are following a break-in contour, a break-in slope, excuse me. Again, heading in a westerly direction, following flags number 11, 12, or adjacent to flags number 11 and 12. Continuing on to 13, that's where you see the bank, top of the bank jump up in elevation to 13.8. Again, I have 2 slopes there, and you can see how the change in slopes dictate where the top of the bank is shown, or how it is shown. Again, we're at flag number 13, going down to adjacent to flag number 14. We have the same situation where we have a steep slope above the elevation, the 100-year flood elevation of elevation 14.1. And then at that point, it jumps down, back down to the 11-foot contour. And from that point to the end, it follows the 11-foot contour. And again, how that is defined is that if a slope is between 1 and 10, 1 foot vertical, 10-foot length, very gentle slope, up to a 1 foot vertical and a 4 foot horizontal distance. The policy, DEP policy, when it falls in that range, it is the 100-year flood boundary. And again, back at adjacent to flag number 15 to the end, heading in the southwest direction, it is the 100-year floodplain elevation 11. So there, from there, we've shown our 50 and 100-foot buffer zones. We also show the 200-foot riparian zone, which is from the edge of the creek. So that, in essence, what we've done to define the bank, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Amy?
No real questions. The purpose of tonight is just to approve the delineation. If there's any other further work on this property that's going to be within your jurisdiction, it would have to come for conservation in the future. This is just to approve the delineations. So this one, while you do have salt marsh and things like that on the property, what we're regulating from are the riverfront area, which is 200 feet from the mean high water line of the river, as well as 100 feet, because that's the most landward resource area from the top of the coastal bank, which in some cases is a true coastal bank vertical buffer, in other cases is the floodplain boundary. So we walked out there today, and I'd walked out here previously and kind of followed your flag line, John, but I didn't. Today when we walked up here, we were kind of just up in the upland, and I don't know if you had flagged like the 100-foot buffer or 200-foot in the previously. Okay, because we saw a few flags there, but I wasn't sure.
The flags you saw
Upland.
in upland is most likely traverse points that we
Okay.
use to locate
Okay.
the boundary.
I was just curious. I mean, what's critical is where you measure from, so from your wetland lines there. I am comfortable with the wetland delineation as presented. It is based on elevation and slope, so we don't have to worry about plant types and communities so much in this one. I actually didn't mean
That's
that.
unfortunate.
That's the next one. I didn't mean that even. I realized it afterwards. That was cruel of me, and I didn't mean it. So anyway, I do recommend the approval of the delineation with a positive one determination that the area described is subject to protection under the Wetland Protection Act, and that any work within this area would require filing a notice of intent. And also a positive 2A, that the wetland delineation is confirmed as accurate. This determination would be valid for 3 years.
John?
I don't have any comments. It appears to be very carefully and meticulously done. And taking it, so it seems fine to proceed to me.
Stan?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not the expert you are. It would have been nice to see the mark where the flags are as we walk the property, to see what we were actually looking at. But I trust your judgment, so.
Thanks. Mark?
I have no remarks.
Jim?
I just have some questions about the delineation of the mean high water with the amount of salt marsh we have landward of that in certain places. Is that simply an elevation that you got that from?
The mean high water, you mean?
Right.
Yeah, that would be the edge of the creek. The actual where the creek, the sidewall of the creek is where you start the riverfront area.
even though mean high water may actually be landward of that. So it seems like it would,
It's supposed to be mean high water.
It is mean high water.
Yeah.
I found that now, it's not flood stage or.
yeah, I
anything like
understand that, yeah.
Um,
With that amount of salt.
Groundwater
Yeah.
and high water, is close to the surface, that's why you have a salt marsh
Mhm.
at that area. But I think the creek is pretty well defined, and that's how we've come up with the 200-foot riverfront, excuse me.
Yeah, I would think that arguably it could be landward of that due to, I think mean high water may come up landward of that just by looking at it, but.
I can't say that on an extreme high tide.
No, I'm talking about a mean, I'm sure at an extreme high tide, there's, you know,
There's probably
1 to
water-
2 feet of water over all that.
over
Yeah,
the salt marsh.
but on a mean high tide, it would seem that it would,
Well, the mean high tide in the Nantucket Sound is somewhere around 3, I think, 3.25. And you can see that the salt marsh, the backside of the salt marsh is, 8.5. So you have quite a bit of clearance between where your mean high water is on the Nantucket Sound and where it might be found here.
I mean, salt marsh doesn't tend to exist at all unless it must be inundated at some times.
Yeah, do you know, well, sorry, it wasn't even thinking, marsh species that you found in that location? Was it a tide bush, was it Spartina?
It was,
Tables.
well, as you get closer to the creek, it started to get, Spartina and the salt marsh and the lack of it, yeah.
I mean, so so the riverfront is a critical piece to this.
It really is, yeah.
If we wanted to just be able to take a little bit of a closer look, would that be amenable?
Well, obviously, the reason we're here is so we can set in stone for at least 3 years where your resources are.
Right,
Um,
I was concentrating more on the bank and whatnot,
Mhm.
but if there is a question about where mean high water kind of falls, whether it is the edge of the actual creek itself or if it's a little landward up in that marsh area, it might be worth taking the, 2 weeks' time to just look at that.
Obviously, if the commission's uncomfortable with it, we can look at that.
Can I just ask for clarification, what the source of your data is, Jim? Because I'm not sure. I mean, looking, the landward edge, according to this plan, the landward edge of the salt marsh is almost 8 feet.
Mhm.
So are you questioning the elevations there? Because, I don't think we would question what the Nantucket Sound mean high water level is. It's something like 3 to 3.5 feet. And so.
Yeah, I think it's
like
4.2 feet is Nantucket Sound, right?
Okay, 4 feet, so still there's several feet between there and what the landward edge of the salt marsh is here. Are you saying you think there wouldn't be salt marsh there? Or that would be a little
I think from looking at it, the mean high water comes up beyond where it's marked edge of river. Exactly where, you'd have to stake it out at mean high water, or, but I believe there's water in there.
We do have average tides around.
It's
we're
probably
getting into some
the
average
best way to
tides.
look at it.
Might be a good way to just look at it. It is kind of flat right through there, at the very base, and especially up in here.
What was the tide when we were in there today?
I don't know, but we were
We're in
really
today's
kind of,
low.
we were on the slope itself. We didn't kind
Well, I
of
was looking
bushwhack
down-
through.
I was looking down there trying
Yeah.
to see the water. I couldn't see any water.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't go all the way down there, so.
Yeah. I mean, this is going to be used potentially for future purposes of the property, so we want to get this, make sure that that's right.
Are there any other comments?
I have a question.
No.
Yeah,
So first, I walked through the same.
could you say who you were?
My name is Mr. Bosch. I'm on the one of the owners of the Red River property.
Sorry?
I'm one of the owner of the
Okay.
Red River Street property.
Okay.
So,
Would you mind, it's technically, we're recording this, so you have to, you can use this one or that one, whichever. We need a microphone on here. Sorry, thank you.
so as you say, you walk through it and you see some marking, and the question I have is who conduct the survey? Okay, because I see the 3 different flags,
Mhm.
blue, pink, and green. So I was kind of confused how they're marked. And the other question is, you have here 200-foot riverfront boundaries, which goes directly to the 10-foot, 11-foot elevation, and also to the 100-year-foot boundary. So is this supposed to be this way?
The two, go ahead.
No,
You go ahead.
the 200-foot riparian zone from the river is from the edge of the river. Not, it doesn't, the 200-foot does not have anything to do with the 100-year flood, the 11-foot contour.
Mean high water line of the river, landward 200 feet. And then the 100-foot buffer zone to the coastal bank is from the coastal bank or flood zone, 100 feet back. So there's 2 different resource areas here.
So this 100 buffer zone, is this the blue flags for the property, or?
I'll have to get back to Amy on the flag colors. I didn't realize there were multiple colors out there.
Yeah, because most of them, the new, they look like the pink one, but they're scattered into the trees, into the sticks of the ground.
The blue is the river. I know that just from walking it, the blue is the river.
But I have a picture that the blue and the pink one are on the same place.
They could.
No,
Then-
well,
do you want to look, John?
I need to look.
Okay.
I need to look, because they would not have staked the 100-foot buffer zone
In one location and
in
not
one
others.
location and others. And when we did the survey, we hadn't established where that coastal bank was, because we had to do it through topography.
Yeah, we're probably right in the same photos, right?
And then just took it today.
Yeah, if you want to leave me, I'm happy to provide the, once he gets me the information, I'm happy to send it to you. If you want to just leave your email next to your name on that sign-in sheet, you can do that.
Okay, do you want me to provide an email or phone?
You can, on that sign-in sheet that's right behind you, if you want to write your email, I'm happy to send it to you.
Is that my name or my name?
Yes.
It sounds like we're going to continue this until the next meeting.
Yeah, we just want to, I think it's wise at this point, we're at the very beginning stages, to look at the, just double check the mean high water line of the river. Just, hopefully it is as we say, but it doesn't hurt at this point, just to double check that.
No, I'd rather have it confirmed.
And our next meeting is scheduled for March 4th.
Yes.
Okay.
Does that work?
So I'll make a motion.
Yeah, John, check his calendar, make sure that's a good date for him.
I'm scheduled to be here anyway.
Oh, look at that.
Perfect. Good. So, yeah, motion would be terrific.
So I move to continue until March 4th.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You can add it if you want. Thank you very much.
All right, the next item on the agenda is a request for a determination of applicability for Jeffrey and Karen Dunn at 49 Nons Road. John, this is yours again?
It is.
Okay.
Hope you group them all together.
John O'Reilly. With me tonight is Dale Nicchio from Encore Construction, who's going to be hopefully doing the work. He's doing some remodel on the house as we speak. So we have a piece of property on Nons Road. It is improved with a single-family home and a deck on the water side of the structure. The proposal is to simply extend the seaward side of the deck out 6 feet, very similar to, in the same orientation of the existing deck directly behind the main portion of the house. For resources, we've identified the tidal creek or land under the ocean, and an adjacent salt marsh has been delineated on the plan, and then land subject to coastal storm flowage. Part of the project is the removal of one 10-inch diameter pine tree, and we would be looking to replant that similar species somewhere on the property at the discretion of the agent. Amy did send me an email yesterday questioning whether or not we had another resource out here, and the other resource being a coastal dune adjacent to the salt marsh on that relatively low, flat area. We did take a look at the property again yesterday afternoon and this morning, and if you've been out there, it doesn't look like a classic dune, and it doesn't have an abrupt or significant seaward-facing scarp like you might see in other dune formations. So we didn't feel it qualified as a dune. The other piece of information that I think is important for the commission to realize in going back to 1984 when the house was built, there were no dune resources noted, and the edge of the creek was basically stagnant to what you see on the plan here today. There have been 3 other plans in 94 and 98, which again delineates the salt marsh and the edge of the Oyster Creek with no notation of dune. So we did not identify the dune. It's only from comments on from staff that we went out and took a look at it again. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Dale is here if you have any construction questions. So I guess I'll stop there, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Amy?
I'm still not, it's not a traditional dune, if it is one, because it's not wind-blown sand deposits. It could be overwash. I know vegetation is not obviously the only indicator of anything out there. There is an area actually where you have a spot elevation of 5.5. It's kind of where existing 10-inch pine tree to be removed. It's just below that. You do have a bit of a small bit of a rise there, and you had some questionable vegetation. Then landward of that, it really changes to, the upland, true upland vegetation. It's a question. Then the other question, you brought up, so from the last hearing, you had mentioned that, average high tides in Tucket Sound are 3 to 4 feet-ish, and here you have edge of marsh much more seaward of that. There is some upper marsh grass, but quite a bit between your edge of marsh and say that what you have is the 50-foot buffer zone. So I just need like a little bit more clarification there that we don't have upper marsh farther in. You do have a very clear edge of bank of the creek, so I'm not worried about that. But because this area is it's so flat, it's really hard to see where kind of one thing starts and another, or one thing stops and another thing starts there. So, did you do any borings or anything out there?
Matt did some borings yesterday afternoon, and it's,
Okay.
it's definitely a deposit. It's not glacial. It's a deposit from wave action, I'm sure.
Okay, so
We did find some aggregate in it,
Yeah,
but there was no soil structure, no soil color, no topsoil. or
yeah,
anything like
right, right. Clearly defining where the resource area is here is critical because it either puts it in the 0 to 50, what they want to do, or the 50 to 100. And I guess I'd like to see the data sheets. I'd like to take another closer look at it. I'm happy to go out there with you. Maybe we should get another opinion on it. This is one, it is very marginal. But what kind of made me question it was that we're pretty much worked on all the properties around here. And there are areas that look, that are just like this, that have been classified as coastal, that have been classified as coastal dune. And I'm happy to provide that information from those other properties to you if you want to compare them. Particularly the Lucy property, just a few houses down, and then another one kind of at the very southern edge of the creek. Again, just to stay consistent and make sure we have it right. So I can't make a recommendation on the actual project to you right now because I'm not positive on it. And this one's a tough one. Sorry,
Yeah.
John.
No, I mean, obviously with your email questioning the resources, I didn't know how far we would get with this project. You know, the delineation of the upper marsh, we can certainly handle. But, you know, obviously we didn't feel it, you know, looked like a dune, acted like a dune. So, we may have to get a coastal geologist in here to define it for us, which would be a third party.
Well, and I can bring in, to hopefully do things quickly and not at a big expense to the client. We have a coastal processing specialist, Greg Berman, with Barnstable County.
Yeah.
If you'd be comfortable with it, if the owners would be comfortable having him take a look at it, I can bring him out to the site. I welcome you to come as well, to take a look at the delineation.
Well, before you do that, I think, you know, allow me to talk to Dale, who needs to
Of
talk
course.
to the homeowners.
Of course.
Because obviously, if the deck and the structure get into the 50-foot, we're talking a whole new filing, notice of intent anyway, and whether or not we could even conform to your 60-foot no new structure
Right.
policy. So before we involve Greg or somebody else, let me talk to Dale.
Sure.
and
He's just a
get that.
free resource.
No, I know, and he'll give us a straight answer. I have no
He will.
problem using him, so.
All right.
So I think at this point, if you could ask for the 2-week continuance again.
I don't know if they have any questions.
I'd be happy to answer any other questions. Sorry.
I don't have any questions, it's unclear to me what the answer is.
Dan?
No remarks.
Yeah, that looks like a area of deposited sand that became vegetated, which sometimes, due to different conditions, beaches and dunes become vegetated. I'm not even sure whether that makes them not a dune or not. But it's certainly not upland, it's that sort of dunes
Yeah.
with vegetation, like trees don't tend to grow there or anything, so. Be interested to see what the delineation proves.
Yeah, I think given the proximity to the 50-foot buffer to the proposed project here, we really need to make sure that we're categorizing this properly. So can we get a motion then to continue this also to March 4th?
Yeah, we might ask for another continuance depending on how quickly we get out there if we want to move forward. But
Start with the
That's fine.
4th.
Can we start with the 4th and then we can, I just keep it posted as
Okay.
well.
Good.
make
If I could ask a question, does
Yes.
that mean it has to come back before the entire board after we meet with the previous person? He can't just say it's not a community, they don't find it.
No.
No, because the commission then has to vote on the project.
Hmm?
The commission then has to vote on the actual project. We're questioning the delineation at this point.
But we can't vote on the project tonight on the basis of whether it's a community or not?
We don't know exactly where it falls.
Yeah, it might have a completely different impact on mitigation and the proximity. You might not even be able to build a deck there if it's in the 50. So there's a lot riding on how this is going to be classified.
It seems as something that should have been dealt with previously, though. There's a lot riding on it.
I'm sorry, say that again?
It seems like it's something that should have been dealt with previously if there's a lot riding on it.
There's been no recent filings for this.
No, I'm saying though, the previous time that I came in and talked to you about the project.
Well, I mean, we have a certain set of facts here that we have to consider in order to approve this, and the facts are incomplete at this point in time. So, you know, there's nothing we can do tonight on this. So do I have a motion to continue this then to March 24th?
I'll move to continue.
Second?
I'll second it, yeah.
Till when?
March 4th. And if need be, we will extend it again beyond that, depending on what, yeah.
Just to be fair, I was looking at a piece of paper when we talked on site. I didn't have it, I wasn't out on site looking at the actual field conditions. We talked about it before.
So we have a second on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Right. John, the next one is yours too, I believe. This is a notice of intent for Karen Decker, 39 Prince Charles Drive.
What you have in front of you is the Deckers own the property on Long Pond, 39 Prince Charles Drive. They currently do have a seasonal dock that they've been utilizing for many years, and they've asked us to license the existing seasonal dock and put it in compliance with you folks and with DEP waterways. So what we've done is we've basically show the configuration of the dock as it currently is installed. It is a fully seasonal dock, aluminum sections with pipes for supports that sit on top of pads that rest on the bottom of the pond. You can see that at the terminus of the dock, we have 50 square feet of landing area, and provides 2.7 feet of water at the water side of the dock. It consists of will be 32 feet out from the edge of the shoreline, and the odd configuration here where you have two sections running parallel with the shore, just on the shore. If you've been to the site, it's a well-vegetated bank that's very steep, and so what they've utilized that extension for is to actually store the canoe and kayaks that they use, so they don't have to deal with putting them up against the banking or carrying them up to the rear of the home when they're in use on a daily rate. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I believe it is in conformance with your dock regulations. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Amy?
Our dock regulations state that the dock should be T-rail shaped. I'd argue that the two 8x3 foot sections used for storage of small crafts don't need it. However, I think a quick answer would be currently at the end where the L is, have two 8x3 sections that total about 50 square feet. Potentially they could be added to the end for a larger L or T at the end. It's a little, they're really shallow up near shore there. It doesn't meet our definition of a dock, and if you keep those there, but you may be able to move those elsewhere so that it does either make it a T or add on to and make a bigger end what you already have. So I think with some minor modification, it could meet. So the docks are currently being stored right at the toe, on the toe of the slope, right now, right at the water's edge. Filing said that they were being stored upland, they're definitely down there. So those will definitely have to move. And we did go to site, and I've been to the site many times over the past few years because we've had numerous filings. So when I went there, I did notice, and forgive me when I was talking the other day, John, I was talking about the other projects, not this one. I remember today, and I said I'll just see tonight. There's been pretty extensive cutting on the bank, and I know that's not you. So
Not this time. Not
no,
this time.
no, the RDA from 2015 said maintenance of vegetation on the bank, and the vegetation was to be maintained at a height of about 4 feet. Pretty much all the oak saplings have been cut to the ground. Very within the past few months, I would say. So my recommendation is we deal with that separately. Either if you want to have an enforcement action with the client themselves, the homeowners themselves. They were, a few years ago, they were allowed to do some pruning, and they were supposed to do some planting, and they did, planted 20 shrubs. I don't know how those are doing. It's hard to tell this time of year where anything is, but it's kind of a different, it's different from what we're doing here. So this is an after the fact, trying to get permits for a dock that's been there for a long time and get it legal. I'd recommend we treat it differently, but it wasn't just a couple saplings, it's all of the oak saplings on the slope. I'd recommend we get the dock itself into conformance with our kind of configuration requirements and then deal with that separately.
Okay.
Good. Jim, you want to start off?
Sure. Yeah, I agree with Amy that, are pretty clear there has to be the L or T section, so having two different float, this is essentially two floats where we only allow one float. I do see the possibility of adding something to the end, although I think depending on how you do it, it would be oversized. I mean,
Right, 'cause that
the
walkway
T,
comes in the middle, yeah.
yeah, so you could put like one of the sections off to the side, and that would make it 96 square feet or 92. But if you put both out there, it would end up being,
Or, I mean, maybe these.
or essentially you could take one out and put four going the other way. But one way
Right.
or the other, the T part of the T has to be under 100 square feet. That's- Right.
I didn't know. Okay. So, I had figured that the lone two sections close to the bank would be questioned by this commission.
Mhm.
So relocating them out into a T or a larger, area out dock, we can do that, and we would comply with that 100-foot square feet.
Mhm.
Would the commission have an issue if we added one more 8 feet of length to this? This would not, still would be in keeping with your regulations and certainly would provide deeper water.
Yeah, it's really at 2.7 on the far edge.
Yep.
I I always say it's a minor plan change.
Yeah, and I think the way it would be done is you take, to avoid going over the 100 square feet, you take the 4 and put them on the outside of all the
Just move
existing.
Yes.
the end of the T.
And that
Right.
would meet it, yeah.
Or we could add one length of 8 and then still use, I'm just trying to use the
Yeah.
pieces that he has there.
Right, right.
Well, we can come up, I mean, I'm hearing it loud and clear, you want those two shoreline sections removed and reconfigured, so we can.
Yeah.
Square footage.
So, and then, my comment, I would, if you could come back before us with the potential enforcement action on the other stuff.
Yeah, I'll contact. No, it's the T on the end.
Probably me.
Okay.
They're out of town right now, for the season, I think.
I'll just coordinate through you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I can't really speak to anything that's gone on the upland, obviously. And I would like to try to treat this separately because this needs to go on further. And the first thing I'll do tomorrow morning is I'm going to email the client, of course, and let them know of the cutting concern. And by the time you and I meet, I may be authorized to prepare, a new notice to address the banking. But
And it may not, so I think the oak saplings, if they're properly cut the right way, everything will regenerate. And probably do a little bit of planting, but I think, first of all the debris was also just left on the banking, so it's going to shade out anything that was trying to grow, lying on top of it. But if they say that, well, we were authorized to do pruning, well, 4 feet kind of at the top of the bank, and then things were supposed to get kind of taller as you went down. I do have the determination if you want a copy of it back from them.
if you could email that to me, or
Yeah,
I
I'd
can
be
just
happy
come by
to.
and pick it up tomorrow, that's fine. I obviously not a big fan of enforcement orders.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone is. So if I could have an opportunity to consult with the client and then maybe get a meeting out on the site.
Yeah, that's fine, it's not gonna go out tomorrow.
I was hoping not to avoid the board voting for enforcement order, that's all.
Yeah, that's not what I'm asking for.
No, as long as the cooperation, I think we're gonna vote to issue that.
Mark, comment?
Nope, no remarks.
In the narrative, where you talk about a variance at the 2.5 foot of water, was that for those 2 floats near the edge of the shore that we're talking about moving out further?
Technically, you have 2.5 feet at the,
Yeah, we have 2.5.
Right, I couldn't tell from the plan with my screen here.
yeah,
Well,
no.
this is where I get confused by your dock regulations. Your dock regulations allow 100 square feet limit.
Not of the whole dock, but of the float.
So one thing I put in my site summary that you didn't have a chance to see is that our regulations are confusing because some will be, the way we redefined recently dock and pier, it almost makes it sound like it's the entire structure. But it's, when I remember we redid the regulations, it really was meant to just be that float end, because there's no way if you allow up to an 80-foot long dock, that it can only be 100 square feet. I mean, when you're terrible at
I
balance,
was
like
just
I
trying to read
am,
the regulations.
it's not
So
gonna.
that, to answer your question, that was the variance I was talking about. That I was looking at the entire structure being 192 square feet. And the regulations, how I read them.
So
That's what I was talking about.
when we redo our regs, we're
So just in the conversation we had here about the reconfiguring
Yeah.
the outer and keeping it under 100, it became clear as how you folks are interpreting it.
Right.
So you are looking at extending the dock further so you'd even be deeper? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, we would get more water by going out another 8 feet, how that would be. And the only reason I say that is I'd rather try to use the structure they already have.
Mhm.
And if we have the ability to go out, and there's no big objection that I'm hearing, I could talk to the client about that.
I guess my other concern is that in the off-season storage of the dock itself, like we said, it should be,
That's going to be a condition that I've already told them, that you folks, if successful, would require them to be storing in that one area.
well, even where we were looking at that little seating area right there,
Right up
That's
above.
flat.
which isn't that too far up. It could even be stored there, but not on the
So,
On the bank.
bank.
that would be great, just, I can talk to them about that, but it can certainly be conditioned. I told them that one of the conditions is that they're gonna want, the commission's gonna want the dock out of the way. So,
And then the storage issue that they were looking for, so if you have the float figure, that would satisfy their
that would
needs.
satisfy them, yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
Or potentially, I mean, you already have an existing set of stairs and railings. I mean, if they didn't want to, since this end is going to be quite a bit far out, if that's where they're kind of putting, their watercraft at the end of the day and don't want to worry about it, if they're worried about it farther out, maybe you could hang some racks
We could come up with some racks on the
off
stairway.
the side of the staircase or something like that, just to hang them, see,
That's all I have.
during the season.
Any questions, John?
Oh, so I agree pretty much with what's been said about the dock. I gotta say that the cutting didn't look good at all to me. It wasn't, Amy's mentioning the oak sapling, but that's not all that was cut. I mean, there was a lot of shrubs and like rugosa, Rosa
Yeah,
rugosa
I
that
forgot
were
about the
cut
Rosa rose.
and just left there. And personally, I get that you don't like enforcement orders, but sometimes it's necessary to make a point. I'm not going to push the point tonight, but I don't necessarily go along with the idea when there's this in such bald disregard, I guess I would call it, for what
This could be suggested for other enforcement.
yeah, I know, I'm just trying to,
Mhm.
it's different. It's not, and we've seen it elsewhere too, and just to see it again, disturbs me that the point has been made. You won't get it. So hopefully it won't happen again here.
I guess my comment on that, though, is this is, from my perspective, one of the worst ones I've seen,
Yeah.
of the ones I've been looking
Yeah.
at. I mean, the whole bank was completely top to bottom taken care of.
Yeah. And I think it's, from my perspective, it's aggravated too by the fact that we had already previously given them conditions, for maintaining that bank and how it was to be maintained, and they just ignored them completely. So I'm of the same mind that John is, that in this case, I won't dismiss the possibility of enforcement action against them for this, because of the complete disregard for the orders that we put out before. I'm not sure how we would possibly assume that they would comply with anything we ask them to do going forward if there's not some sort of a penalty to it. So that's to be determined in the future. So as I understand it then, so you'll redesign the dock and come back to us. You'll also discuss our concerns with the owners. And then we'll reconvene on this.
And that's fine, and I certainly didn't mean to imply that I didn't want the commission or Amy reaching out to the owner. And I'm kind of blindsided by it.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's fine. But, obviously, you as a commission have to do what you have to do, and I totally respect that. And it is, from your perspective, it is very frustrating to have, go through the pains and penalties of a permit and then not have the permit followed. If that's in fact what could happen.
Would the commission be comfortable, since there's only minor modifications that have to be done to the plan, meaning moving those two sections, putting them at the end, reconfiguring, would you be comfortable approving the project tonight and then getting a change of, it's just really a change in plan from John by the time of the next meeting, or do you want to see it at the next meeting?
Well, we still have the issue of the enforcement order. How would we handle that? Or the cutting?
That's
I mean,
separate, so
yeah.
that would be a discussion item. on your next meeting or the one thereafter, depending on, yeah, it would be a discussion item.
All right.
It wouldn't be part of, it's really not part of this application, we noticed when we were there. So I would put it as a discussion and enforcement item on the future, on the next agenda or whatnot. So you don't have to necessarily, if you're comfortable with him making the minor changes and me reviewing them, you could vote on the doc tonight.
Let me ask you then, John, do you think the owners would prefer to come back and have an audience next week or next meeting as far as the cuttings, or deal with it outside of this?
I believe they're down in South or North Carolina for the winter. I can check with them. I appreciate you trying to get the plan approved, but, you know, I'm gonna be back on the 4th anyway. You know, whatever the commission feels more comfortable. I think it's not a matter of having them come in, it's just a matter if they're in town.
Yeah. All right. I think we're best served just getting final plans and just putting it on the agenda for the next meeting, and we'll just deal with it then. We'll wrap it up then. I mean, nothing's going to happen between now and then anyhow, I assume.
Just a whole bunch of emails, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for March 4th, continue this?
I'll bring the coffee, yes.
And actually, we
Oh, good. So we'll have plenty of time to spend on this.
I can't, well, we had a few people but it shouldn't be too bad.
So can we get a motion to?
I'll make a motion to continue the RDA for 39 Prince Charles Drive for March 4th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Is that it?
Sorry.
That's enough.
John O'Reilly show.
I should have been a few minutes later, but you would have been in and out of here.
I know, no, it's not a problem.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I'll take those.
Encore and listen to
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, John.
you all have a good night.
Good night.
You too.
No speeding on the way home.
No, nice and easy ride. Take care.
Bye.
Next item on the agenda, notice of intent for Elizabeth Maher at 48 Harbor Road.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Teresa Sprague from Blue Flex Design here on behalf of Elizabeth Maher at 48 Harbor Road. Basically, this has no structure involved, which is a good thing. It's all vegetation management. If you had an opportunity to go out to the site, you'll see that there was significant damage in the storms last summer. 10 white poplar trees were blown over and snapped. There were several other white poplar trees in really poor condition, and a significant amount of invasive vegetation. A lot of them have been girdled already by bittersweet. So the main goal of the plan that we're presenting this evening is to manage the invasive vegetation and then to restore all of the vertical layers, canopy, shrub, and ground cover layer. We noted that the invasive vegetation on site is mainly Asiatic bittersweet along with the white poplar. There's also some shrub honeysuckle and vine honeysuckle. There's a little bit of poison ivy and greenbrier, but nothing significant. As you know, they are native species. We just want to prevent them from becoming overly aggressive. There's absolutely no ground cover on this bank whatsoever. I have some photographs that are a little bit more up close. I can pass those to the commissioner, and you can keep
One of
those
us
for
were
the
there
file.
today too.
Okay, as well as, yes, what's included in
I'll take it back.
in our land management plan. There is some scarping, there is some erosion at the toe of this bank. We did take a look at it due to the absolute lack of ground cover and shrub layer vegetation, but it appears the scarp is coming from the toe. So whether that's from wave action, from boats coming in and out of the harbor, I'm not sure. Obviously, this is not a velocity area. I'm sorry.
You get ice.
Yeah, exactly. So I think having, one of the goals here is to try and get some vegetation established at the toe of the bank to see if we can help protect that toe area. So using some high marsh vegetation and some backwards at the toe of the bank. So the plan is to, I know I'm rushing through this, but I think everybody got a very good sense of what was happening out there, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions. The goals and objectives are to increase the protection of the resource areas, by removing about 9,000 square feet of invasive vegetation and restoring that all back with native vegetation. Obviously, it protects and it enhances the wildlife habitat function of the buffer zone. We're proposing to remove a 10-foot strip of lawn and create more buffer at the top of the coastal bank in order to better protect that bank. And as well as meet the property owner's goals for the landscape, which is to replace the invasive canopy and all the canopy that has been lost with native canopy trees. I do want to point out that I caught a major typo on this plan right before I came out the door this morning, and if you haven't seen it, I want to apologize. There is a note on the plan that says maintain a view corridor as per Chatham printing that.
No, I didn't. Oh, I see, it's right there.
I caught it just before I came out the
Oh,
door,
okay, that's
and
fine.
so, okay, I will submit new plans and remove that. Emma, because I pointed it out to her, we both had a laugh, and she was a little embarrassed about that, but there's no view corridor proposed on this plan. We are proposing to remove some of the invasive vegetation. You can see that it's been regularly maintained, the honeysuckle at about a 4 to 5 foot height. That's going to all be replanted with native vegetation that will be allowed to reach mature fruiting size. We want to eliminate all disturbance on this bank from here on out. So with that, we are proposing to plant 253 shrubs and 25 trees, and Ms. Maker has pointed out that she would like to plant more trees in the future, but she'd like to start with the 25 we're proposing, including a mix of holly, cedar, white oak, and lankier. There is a really nice white oak on the southern end of the property, and anything that's native will remain in place and intact. The only thing we would do is cut invasive vines, allow them to biodegrade, and then remove them from that vegetation. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the proposed vegetation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't really have any questions. Looks like it'll be an improvement if this plan comes to fruition, so.
Yeah,
Good.
I think so.
It looks to me like it's a win-win. What's the overall time frame, start to finish?
Actually, we'd like to start invasive species management as soon as we get the permit so that we can plant the trees this spring. So we'd like to get the trees planted as soon as possible so that they get established. And then, of course, the bank will be seeded and blanketed with erosion control, coconut star erosion control blanket. We know we're going to have to do some follow-up management, particularly with the bittersweet, with the seed bank that's there, get the ground cover layer established this year, and then this season, and then get shrub layer established either in the fall or early spring 2021.
Stan?
All set.
John?
Yeah, I agree, it looks great. I just, one question, you just mentioned you were going to cut the invasives and leave them to biodegrade. Isn't there a risk, particularly with bittersweet, that it's just going to reestablish and reroot?
Absolutely. So when I say that, I mean from the trees. So there's an oak tree that's in very good health, so we want to cut it and allow the vines to biodegrade before we pull it out of the tree.
Just
But
up in the tree.
Up in the canopy, right, exactly, so we don't do any more damage to the tree. But the rest of the material will be cut and then it will be treated with a systemic herbicide to allow it to get.
I don't have any more questions.
Tracy, the only question I have is, you mentioned there's a 10-foot strip of grass that will be naturalized. Where is that? I can't really make the distinction between the two.
So you can see there is a note, we have, we're kind of showing where they've historically kind of sat two Adirondack chairs, and you see that line that says 10 feet? There's a marking there with an arrow.
Still, it's no, I see the two chairs.
Yep, and then in
there's,
front of it, there's
I
a
see.
tick mark that says 10 feet. That's currently lawn. The lawn goes right up to the top of the coastal.
okay, so it's not the whole property line from border to border.
It's basically
just
coming
a
all the
strip in the
way-
middle.
Yep, it's basically coming all the way up. There's some existing vegetation on the north side that will all remain. It's a mix of cedars, and then I believe there's some arborvitaes in there. And then there's a fence that blocks the area where the pool is located. and on the south. So you can see this indicates there's an existing fence there.
Yep.
And then there's the pool back here. So basically, we're creating that vegetated buffer strip right to the edge of that fence. We're increasing that buffer strip.
So, looking at this plot plan,
Yes.
maybe you can just sort of give us a better idea from this, which shows the existing conditions.
Yes, so you can see the edge of vegetation. It says 100-year flood zone, and you can kind of see that squiggly line. That's the current edge of the lawn. So
Yep.
we're pulling that edge of vegetation out another 10 feet landward.
Oh, I
So
see.
that we're creating a vegetated buffer strip right up to the point where it juts out, it sort of juts out and creates this little peninsula, and that's where the fence picks up. And then the area just to the south of that little jut out is where, is their play space and their swimming pool is back there.
Okay, so it's basically your 11 grade line is the 100-year flood zone, is that correct?
The 11 grade line is the 100-year flood zone, yes,
And
exactly.
Up
And
to that is currently grass.
Up to it's actually about the 12. You can see there's a little bit of a, the edge of the, the edge of the existing vegetation where the lawn ends is this line here that follows along, this kind of squiggly line
Yep.
here. And then we're coming in 10 feet from there.
Okay, all right,
Yep.
okay, good. Yeah, again, as was commented, I think this is a win-win for everybody on this one. This looks very well planned out and very well managed and all, so.
Maybe I could talk to the town about doing some of these management on our property.
We're gonna go
Basin.
right to the edge of the town property.
Yeah, I
It's
just
down on that southern
Would
slope.
hate to see
It come back.
it come back because the town isn't, I mean, at least,
That would be a nice, I've noticed
You
that
think it cut.
our properties is full of invasive. So.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of poplars there too. I've worked a lot with Beth Maher over the past few years. 'Cause her poplars just keep falling down.
Yes, they
And
do.
taking the bank with them. So, and that's what they do.
Yeah.
So I'd like to make it so maybe she doesn't get quite as many invasives if we can manage our property a little better.
Yeah, and she's, one of the things that is fabulous about working with Beth is that she, you know, a lot of times we come and then people go, oh, plant more trees. And they're like, oh,
This is great.
she's really wants, I mean, she really appreciates her privacy and her
Yeah.
screening and wants to maintain that, absolutely, so, yeah.
You would put the conditions on, you know, the biannual monitoring reports, things like that.
Yep.
No more chemical application within conservation jurisdiction with the exception of a certified herbicide applicator for the invasive management only.
Yeah.
That would really, her lawn areas would have to, you
Yeah.
know, naturalize. That was in our jurisdiction.
Okay,
And then, let's say, we should also condition that if anybody other than Blue Flags is to do the work, that they need to get approval from the Conservation Commission, because it's a really involved plan.
yeah. We've already given her an estimate, we have a contract to go forward with the plan if it's approved, so, yeah, we'll be on the project.
I'll make a motion to approve notice of intent for 48 Harbor Road, vegetation management and planting with the conditions
Second.
mentioned by Amy.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
You'll have to talk quicker.
Yeah.
I like bringing these ones.
Yeah, right. I'm not asking for something in addition, we're just doing this because it's a good thing to do.
Next item on the agenda is the order of conditions for 21 Deacons Folly Road.
I was just waiting for one last landscape plan revision because maybe they said I have it, I said I don't, maybe I gave all my copies to you. The landscaping plan didn't reflect, the latest one I had wasn't like, the final site plan had the reduction of the hardscape really to match existing disturbance. The landscape plan was an older one that I had, so I will straighten all that out, you don't have to worry about that, just to let you know, I have to add to that. But the special conditions shouldn't change.
There was one comment I had, Amy, under number 6, where we talked about the roof runoff was going to be directed into gutters and dry wells and all. We had agreed that they were going to have the runoff from the new roof that's going over the deck to be back outside the 100, directed into a dry well outside the 100.
Let me check the plan.
That's gonna be tough.
It's not
Well, he's got a
outside the
lot of
100.
height. I mean, the
It's
pitch of
outside,
that.
I think we said outside the 50.
No, 100.
No, it's not outside the 100.
That's almost up to the road.
Yeah, I don't think,
It's
I
not
don't, I don't
50.
think you
Was it
can
the
get it.
50?
Yeah, I think it might
They're
be-
right
might be
outside the
50.
50, where they've shown them. The 100's way out here with the septic.
You're right, I'm
is-
sorry. Yeah, it was the
That's
50
okay.
we were concerned about, right?
So, yes, they submitted
So it's on the new
plan.
plan.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
There's a well there and.
Oh, yeah.
Number,
They were going to abandon that.
Yes, so we add that condition to abandon the
Yeah,
existing.
they
and
were-
not used for using.
They were gonna use it for
irrigation,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Got it.
Because there, was there an irrigation system? I'm trying to remember which is which.
Do you want to add any specifics to how that, well casing is secured?
If you would like to give me some language, that would be helpful. You do it via email if you want, I can incorporate it.
filling it.
Well, it shall, but it really should be at least capped, yeah, depending on what the casing is and how it's done. Yeah.
I think it was steel, if I remember seeing it correctly.
I don't remember.
Yeah, if you just want to send me a sentence or two, that would be helpful, and then I could just put it right in. Thank you. It's not my area of expertise. Anything else for that one?
I'm good with that one.
So, are we gonna have to?
Yeah, though, I'll straighten it out with the landscape plan. It could have just been a matter of I could have accidentally given out all my copies of the newest one.
So do you want to pen this until next week then?
No.
We can approve it with the
You can approve it.
changes that
I'll
we've discussed.
add that.
All right, we have a motion to approve.
Yeah.
Move to approve the order of conditions for 21 Eaton's Follow Road.
Second?
Amendments as noted.
Thank you.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's nice. Over here.
We have an order of conditions for 2071 Route 28, head of Bay Road, a screened porch and rebuild timber steps.
This one I couldn't remember. For number 5, I think we really kind of were saying a stone drainage trench as opposed to dry wells.
Yes.
But I couldn't remember, so I put them both on there. Do you want me to just
Yeah.
take the dry well out and put the stone trench, or leave it up to them?
Stone drainage trench
Right,
around the thing, right?
around the house rather than the dry well, because.
They have
because we had
dry
the
wells
bank
right
there and
now.
everything,
but-
and we were talking about all the runoff off the roof and everything,
Huge
and
roof.
would there be enough capacity for
Yeah.
it, so that's where Mark recommended the trench around
That's
the house
fine.
instead.
Doesn't matter to me, you just want me
Yeah.
to remove the dry well
Fine.
part and leave it just to be a trench? It's one on Pleasant Bay that we went to.
Yeah, because I think we have this place right now.
I would say if they didn't a dry well, they shouldn't incorporate it into existing dry wells. There's a huge roof area going into those, but they should put a new one in if they're gonna do it.
The way it reads now says it's also acceptable, but I thought we wanted to
I couldn't remember, and I didn't have a chance to look at the tape.
Well, I mean, this, what it says is a native stone trench drain along the drip line is also accepted.
No, I thought we agreed
I'll
to.
just
Yeah,
take
that
the
would have to be,
drywall.
that would have to be in addition, not,
Why don't I just take the drywall out if that's what you want, is a stone trench?
That was my understanding. They were originally talking about the dry well, and we thought that wouldn't satisfy the condition. You recommended the trench and drip
Yeah,
line
and they were
around
fine
it,
with
and I
that.
think that removed the dry well at that point. That was my understanding.
That's kind of how I remember
yeah, I
it,
think
too.
you're right. I'm trying to remember the job.
The one right by on
On
Pleasant Bay, right off of 28 there.
Looks down onto the,
At the end of
onto
Bay
Muddy
Road.
Creek and
They're making a screen porch.
And it had the, and it had
I'm
the-
blank, I don't have it.
Remember the tiny little narrow staircase that, we almost died on?
Oh, yeah. Now I do. Yeah, all right. Yes, you're right, that's correct. Yep, okay. Now I remember.
And I noticed about the steps too, because originally we said they could probably widen them if they wanted to, and they said no.
They didn't
because
want to,
they
so
didn't want
let's
to.
leave it.
Yep.
And they have the option to use stone rather than wood.
But it still can't be any wider.
Yep.
Amy, on number 8, I think on most of them we've been putting in that sentence that says, any reseeding of lawn area shall be
Oh.
with a native seed mix. Other than that, I'm good with that one.
you have a motion on the order of conditions?
Make a motion to approve the order of conditions for 2071 Route 28, head of the Bay Road.
Second?
No, he's asking.
Oh,
for a
you're
second.
asking for a second? I thought you said
Second.
With
You said it so
amendments.
emphatically.
With amendments.
With amendments.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Second.
Who's that?
I do too.
Can the chairman second? I guess you
I
can.
know.
Yeah, why not?
Sure.
Yeah,
Uh,
I know.
Next item on the agenda, request for extension permit for Harbor Watch Condominium Association.
Nikki and I talked about this. We think you should give them a 1-year extension only. And they need to prove that they can come into compliance. So, a couple of years ago, I worked a lot with them on this, and I think the first year, it went very well. Then the condo association kind of came under new people a little bit, I believe, and things have strayed a little bit. So most of it does comply with the pruning, but there is a pathway near one particular unit that goes essentially nowhere, and that shouldn't have been. And then there's also some vegetation that's been trimmed to 1 feet, and recently a tree was removed. I should have noted to Nikki that one was I allowed, that was after the tornado. I allowed them to remove that one tree, so that's fine. But everything that they did cut, even trimmed down to 1 feet, and it's just in a small area, that will come back, and that they need to kind of get rid of that path that Unit 8 has supposedly made. So I'd recommend a 1-year extension, get them back into compliance, and then go from there.
What's the permit for?
It is to, just to prune, or maintain their view,
Okay.
so,
These are the condominiums right across from the go-kart track.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, going
Yeah,
up the
sure,
hills towards
yeah.
Handler's Garage.
Yeah.
Mhm. So they had 3 view corridors here, and then in between the corridors, there's kind of larger sections of shrubs and trees. And they were allowed, there was a height requirement. You know, shrubs at the top of the bank pruned to a height of 4 feet, shrubs at the bottom of the bank should be no shorter than 6. pruning, topping of trees, which they requested, was not granted. They have not been doing that. But for the most part, the shrubs have been pruned correctly to the right height. It's just in this one particular area they're not. So I don't know if it's a contractor who did that, or if it was maybe a owner of a unit or two who kind of took it upon themselves.
Didn't they have the ability to lift the canopy on some of the trees as well,
They did.
under trimming?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Not much though.
Okay.
Because it's segmented already. There's like a few condo units of view, and then there's like tree area, then a few condo units, more trees.
Right.
So there was minor limbing of trees, but that was fine.
Okay. So there's no change to the original permit then?
No.
They just wanted it extended?
They wanted a 3-year. I'm recommending a 1. Nikki recommends a 1.
So is there any connection between this and the next one? They're directly adjacent, right?
No.
No.
Nope. 375 Main Street is up, approaching North Harwich.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, not Route 28.
Okay.
Different name.
But close, look at that, the numbers but, yeah.
Any comments on the extension?
I'm in favor of the 1 year and see if they can,
Yeah.
rectify the issues.
We have a motion?
I would move to grant a 1-year extension to allow Amy the opportunity to work with them to develop any corrections.
Do we have a second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that one's be signed.
All right, next is a request for certificate of compliance for Davenport Companies, 375 Main Street.
Well, I'm not seeing an as-built, and we're waiting on that, and I am not recommending a certificate without it. They said they would get it to us, but it's not in the file. Last time I talked to Nikki, it was around noon time today, and it hadn't been here, and if it was, she put it in the file, so you don't have to continue, but I will recommend we put it on the thing for.
Weren't there supposed to be some plantings going down that old road?
They did do some of the plantings. I need to revisit that. She looked at it. I want to revisit it. They also didn't put the boulders in at the very top. There were supposed to be boulders blocking off that old path, and they hadn't done that yet.
Do you know if there was a condition that the plantings had to survive? Because they probably only planted them in the fall. Or so if there were no,
I seem to remember there were trees of a particular caliber.
yeah, like 6-foot white pines or something.
I don't remember I don't know. I know we went back and
Yeah,
forth
I
about
think-
it, but
No, it says that they were supposed to have been put in within the same season as the start of construction as the house. And I don't think that happened. I'll revisit it.
Well,
So
let's-
no action on this one tonight.
At least if you could make sure that the trees look like they're gonna survive, do you have somewhere what they were supposed to be?
Yes.
Because we did have them do substantial trees, because there was a likelihood of people just blowing through them, kinda.
right.
So we have a plan for path revegetation, so yes, we have a plan for that.
I mean, if we can't be sure they're gonna survive, I would rather wait until the fall anyway to,
Right. They have six white pines and then 15 other native shrubs. And the boulders block that, so.
If I remember, those white pines were supposed to be fairly significant in size. Either, I don't remember if it was 4 feet or 6 feet, but
I don't think it was 6 foot or
I
something.
kind of think it was, yeah, it was exceptionally large for
I had drawn the plan for.
Yeah, the object was to
block it off.
block it off.
So once you get 2 families in that duplex, they're gonna start tearing through there.
Yeah,
It's pretty much
six
good.
white pines,
Yeah.
20
I would
feet
if
on
I went.
center.
Why not? Why wouldn't you?
So we want
Table it.
to table it until, do we need a motion and, no? Okay. Good.
We got 2 sets of minutes.
2 sets of minutes. All right, next item is approval of minutes for June 5th, 2019. So, question for you, Amy. On the 18 Harbor Way, for example, we had a motion to fine the contractor $300. Did we collect that? There's always a question of whether we can identify the contractor.
It was themselves, and yes, they did.
We did? Okay.
They did the work themselves.
Oh, is that right? Oh, because there were large boulders that were
Oh,
put
the
into
bolt,
place.
that, I'm sorry. No, we never found out who the contractor was. I'm sorry, I thought you meant the,
Well, let me ask you then, if we weren't able to identify the contractor, I assume that's
I
because
find the owner.
you did find the owner and they paid it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you. And then the other question I had for you on this Skinnecook Road, there was a lot of issues with respect to the property being cleared in violation and all that sort of thing. Have we gone back to look at
No,
that property?
we need to. Do you notice anything?
So that's something you do, you go back
I'll
and take a
check,
look at
but-
it?
Looks like it's going back, but other than that,
Oh, is that your neighborhood?
it's direct, I look out my kitchen window and I see it. That's pretty much.
He's
why
my
it's
eyes.
here.
Oh, okay, so we're pretty comfortable with the conditions over there? There haven't been any additional clearing?
No, I don't think so. I
Okay.
haven't seen any action.
Okay, all right, good, thanks.
I'm good with the minutes.
Any comments on the minutes? Anyone?
Make a motion to approve the minutes for June 5th.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The next item is the
Do you have January 17th minutes?
January
Was
17th.
that a win?
Hmm?
I thought that was a spec. I'm trying to remember. This is this public hearing one.
The daytime.
Yeah,
hearing.
the bylaw meeting.
Hmm.
Yeah, 10 a.m.
At 10 a.m. That was on a Wednesday?
No, it was a Friday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, what was it?
I was saying, I don't remember it because.
They have long day week?
It's like that's boilerplate,
yeah.
so,
The date might be wrong. That's
yeah, I'll check the date. It
So
might have
mo-
been the 19th.
Minor typo. Last line on first page should be known.
Yeah. Date, what about it? Yeah, it was the right day, January 17th.
Was, okay.
Just, it was supposed to be Friday.
So there were a number of issues that were in these, that came up during this hearing that were not resolved.
Correct.
Right.
And so what's the,
These
this
are
is just,
minutes.
this is just to memorialize the discussion at those minutes, but the expectation is we'll have a subsequent follow-up meeting
Yes,
on this.
you're right.
'Cause we
So
didn't-
we didn't want to push it for this coming town meeting in May
Yep.
because we were tight on the deadline for that and wanted to have some sort more of something that would be palatable, I think, to both waterways and conservation, so we could hopefully go in as a united front in front of town meeting instead of divided.
Yeah, because it seems like there should be some sort of next steps to this. It just kind of
Yeah, I was looking
ends.
at that too. I'll just say there, and another future meeting is planned.
Well, I think at the time you were still trying to find if there's gonna be a fall meeting, you know,
Yeah,
supplemental
we
meeting.
weren't sure
You
if we were
weren't-
gonna
you weren't sure,
try.
right, so.
And then we couldn't all get together before the deadline, so.
Mm.
Are these all bylaw changes or some of them regulations?
Mostly bylaw changes, but this was, to the water dependent structure bylaw.
Right.
Though I do think at times our bylaw gets a little bit too into the weeds, and that some of that information really should be in the regulations. I think we get too much into the details in some locations in the bylaw. But we can work on that too. A lot of towns, they don't get into the, like in the bylaws, they don't get into the nitty-gritty of a shellfish survey,
Mm.
or they don't get
Well,
into necessarily.
In the bylaws, they're in the regulations,
They're in the
though.
regulations, right.
So we just did those bylaw changes that are gonna
For
be
wetlands,
before town meeting.
yeah, under the
Oh, wait.
wetland protection
Yeah.
bylaw, not the
Oh,
water
okay.
dependent structure.
It's a separate bylaw.
Two separate.
All right.
parts of the town.
Yeah.
So,
And the in lieu fees also made it.
Well, even the paragraph above where you're talking about that height
Yeah, I mean,
and
that's some
setbacks
towns,
and stuff
some
like that.
towns put that in the bylaws and others put that into the regulations.
The in lieu fees made it into this year's town meeting.
Yes.
Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
And-
So the in lieu fees is not part of our wetland bylaw. We're proposing changes to our revolving fund language to include the incorporation of in lieu fees. And I gave
Okay.
a description about what that would look like.
And
It
that,
doesn't say like a set amount of money yet. I mean, that will have to be determined by us as a regulation, but it allows for it.
does it say what it has to be used for, or would you figure that out later?
Protection of
Wetland
wetland
resources.
resource areas.
Okay.
so you're gonna modify this? Or should we vote on it?
If you're, yeah, I mean, the changes
With
are pretty
changes?
easy
Yeah.
for me to make, so.
So do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes as amended for January 17.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Thank you.
We don't need to go into executive session because I don't have an update for you because I've requested stuff from council and I haven't got it yet, so.
All right.
Quick updates on other things. We have not caught the person who cut in Island Pond. My camera, I've checked it every few days, not seeing any activity, and it also doesn't look like the person's been back. There's no new activity that I can see there, so. There's a lot of debris that's kind of strewn around. I don't know if we want to remove that, just let it rot.
Debris from the cutting.
Yeah, just all the trees are left. They're saplings, but there's like 30 of them.
The structure's been dismantled.
I took the structure out. There's a walkway that they put across one of the ditches that they made out of the sapling trunks that I gotta take that out too. But right now it's so wet down there that it's hard to kind of get around. Well, you have to remove.
You're gonna leave the camera up?
I'm gonna leave it up for another week or two and see. I don't know if it's worthwhile putting a sign up saying that we've made note of this area is under surveillance, regardless if it is. You know, that this is not, I mean, maybe a little educational science of the person who did this does come back. If it is, I think it's a juvenile, and the way trees were just kind of hacked. Somebody making forts or something out of there, but so maybe some sort of a sign up there for a little while. So if that person does come back, they maybe get a little educated about why they shouldn't be doing this,
Yeah.
aside from the fact that it's not their land.
Yeah, I don't see putting something up saying it's under surveillance, because they'll, you know, if they're inclined to do that, they'll go somewhere else and do it.
Right.
So more educational, I think, makes more sense.
Or to look for the
Take it.
camera, yeah.
Yeah.
So you sent an email sometime in the last 2 weeks about some other place where there was a bunch of trash up
That's Harwich Fort.
Oh,
in Harwich.
Quick mark?
oh,
Whatever.
the Quick Mart,
Yeah, that was directly behind the building, right?
sides, behind,
Quick Mart.
next to
Right by the Dairy Queen.
the lanyard, between the Dairy Queen and the lanyard.
George was there. Fish place.
Well, but yeah, it's the convenience store
Yes.
with the gas station there.
Looked like it was picked up.
Well, they have Board of Health complaints as well, so. Yeah, they're given until next week, I think, to do it. We'll go check on them.
Yeah, I had looked at it, it was,
They were supposed to call and
That's
check
pretty much the
on,
same.
because
no, a lot of stuff was picked up.
it will be us that dictates whether they're in compliance, not, I mean, we'll have to inspect it and say, okay, you're good.
Yeah. It wasn't perfect, but it was better.
It was pretty bad. So,
He said health department's after him, too.
yes. And they seem to be getting into compliance, so we should be fine. All right,
Anything else?
no? Unless anybody is inclined and wants to do a little tree work tomorrow morning, going out 8:30 in the morning to Island Pond. But I have Hannah, I have our AmeriCorps members helping me.
And everybody saw your notice on the Tour de Trash request for volunteers, I assume?
Yes,
Good.
and you and Lynn are helping.
Good.
So Tour de Trash, I mean, wonderful even to help just at the event itself. It's gonna be the last Saturday of April. And then, nope. Last Saturday of April, and we, unfortunately, because that day is so popular for AmeriCorps, we rely pretty heavily on AmeriCorps to volunteer at that event, but they can't that day, except for Hannah. So we just need help with check-in and all that stuff. But we also have monthly meetings, so Ernie and Lynn are interested in for planning meetings for that event too. We've got most of it taken care of, but there's some loose ends.
Good.
So that would be very helpful, just to have a couple extra hands, and maybe if people on the day of the actual event wouldn't mind helping for a couple hours in the morning, that would be wonderful.
Hey, Amy, was there an email regarding the budget? I don't know if I deleted it. Did you forward us?
Not a well, I sent you one a couple of weeks ago
I
about.
deleted it. I couldn't find it. I was
I'll
looking
I'll
at
send it
Okay.
again. Yeah, so I believe it's the first Saturday of March is going to be our budget meetings in front of the Board of Selectmen, and I'm still going to request that they fund it as we've outlined. Might be good to have some support from the commission if possible there.
Is that
Amy,
Saturday?
Have you asked for the change in the amount we can take from the wetlands fund, or the whatever
I
it's?
have not yet.
It'd be good to do, because that's just sitting there, and, you know, that's something we could kind of use,
Some
right?
of it could help, yeah.
There's 40,000 in it, right? Oh, I know.
And what was the change
Our Board of Selectmen to change the level of amount that we can spend every year. There was a cap put on it because many years ago it was, the account went into the red. It was overspent on before any of us or me.
I mean, you know, maybe, I don't know if there's any point in having it as a savings account, but you could say, like, it can't go under 10,000 or something, but there's no sense in it
That's
just
fine, I mean, we keep an eye
building up
on
all this
it.
money.
There's some things we could use
what-
it for.
We have, much needed projects that could even get a jump on some of those things we were gonna do with the CPC money that, as far as Robbins Pond and,
Yeah, it has to
Bell's
be for
Neck.
wetlands protection, so if we can make, as long as we, which those would
yeah,
fit.
yeah, they pretty much almost all of them do.
Especially if we're gonna be cutting our land management budget. So the item that got cut most was, we have $4,000 a year in land management budget. The entire thing was cut.
Well, maybe that's a way I mean, they might be all over that, or be like, all right, we'll take this hit and we're gonna pay for it from, I don't know.
I just don't want, if you get rid of that, my fear is that once it's gone, it's gonna be hard to get it back in subsequent years.
What's the budget?
The budget.
I understand that, yeah, but,
So, and it's such a small amount. We do a
Yeah.
lot with it.
no, I agree, but I mean, we might as well be using this money that's just
I
sitting
completely
there.
agree.
We've got stuff to do, so.
That could just potentially be a discussion item at a Board of Selectmen meeting in the future.
So I wonder if we should try and vote on it next week, just to say like the commission voted to ask.
The boards, okay.
That might carry a little more weight or something.
We haven't adjourned.
Yeah, I don't know if we can today or what.
Would have to be an agenda item on the
Yeah.
meeting.
Okay.
Do it next week, next time.
One other question for Amy. There was a comment in the Chronicle today that Chatham, I believe it is considering using alum treatment for one of their ponds. And someone mentioned Hinckley and the application we did there. And their comment was that once you apply the alum, it becomes sludge in the bottom that has to be removed and disposed of as toxic waste, essentially, is the inference that they painted. And where are we on that? Have we monitored the,
We had the initial monitoring right after it happened. Let me check with let me check in the file, let me check with Heinz, because there was extensive monitoring that needed to get done.
But
And we hired somebody outside to do it,
yeah.
outside of natural
But wasn't
resources.
that
to do it.
originally applied on Long Pond use before we got into?
Long Pond was done over 10 years ago. So alum binds the phosphorus and it sinks to the bottom of the pond. So they are correct that something sinks to the bottom of the pond. And whether or not it is toxic sludge, that I don't know. It does bind it for a certain amount of time, and then supposedly it will re-release into the water column. So there's a life to it. So,
I thought,
I thought we
I
were
don't-
talking
I-
about like 20 years or something like that when
At
Heinz
most.
talked about it.
there is a certain level of concern in some quarters about neurotoxicity of aluminum.
right.
But I looked into this and read whatever I could read about it, and it appears to me that that is a misplaced concern. That, yeah, if it gets into your bloodstream, high levels of aluminum, there may be issues, but your body doesn't metabolize aluminum, it doesn't has the blood barrier in there, and it basically, aluminum is like the third most plentiful element in the Earth's crust. Aluminum is everywhere. It's not a big deal. I don't think the stuff at the bottom of the pond is an issue. And the reason you use aluminum is that normally the phosphorus binds iron in the pond sediments and in the water, but iron can't hold on to the phosphorus in low oxygen environments, which is the issue in our ponds. Aluminum can, and it does hold on to the phosphorus. I don't know, you're saying eventually it degrades and releases the phosphorus. I didn't know that, I didn't read that.
That's what I've read. That
Yeah, that's how I understood it too.
There are people who are very concerned about any alum at all in the water.
Correct.
And that may be where that comment is coming from.
But is it our responsibility to monitor the monitoring reports?
We should.
we have the requirement that they do it, so yes, we should be. I will check on that, and I will say what the status is. And if we are behind, I will talk to Heinz about that.
Okay, all right, thank
Just
you.
remind Heinz too that he committed to creating a action plan to deal with nutrient inputs on town properties, getting all the different boards together and coming up with a town-wide plan.
Like fertilizer treatments and that sort of thing?
Yeah, as far as, golf, school.
Municipal use of fertilizers and.
Yeah, coming up with a municipal plan for
Mhm.
use of,
That's
yeah,
right.
he committed to that as natural resources, and I've seen nothing happen,
Mhm.
so.
All right.
Okay, do that.
Good. Anything else?
No, that's enough.
It's been a
Got
tough
enough
day, I
action
know.
items, eh?
No, I'm just, I was saying, it hasn't really been, the workload is always high, but it's been the other stuff that's been taking up a lot of time lately. So,
Get a motion to adjourn?
I would move to adjourn.
Second it?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And you're welcome to run meetings from now on, too.